Have you ever felt like no matter how organized you try to be, real life always seems to show up with one more expense, one more responsibility, or one more thing to figure out financially? Or have you ever felt like you were finally getting ahead financially, then life showed up? That's how I feel sometimes. A lot of financial stress doesn't come from one huge dramatic moment. Most of the time, it builds slowly through everyday life. Busy schedules can throw a wrench in your finances. Definitely unexpected expenses such as car repairs or the AC going out. You think you've got a pretty good handle on things, and suddenly there's a medical bill or a school expense or something else you never saw coming. You're trying to balance responsibilities while still feeling like you're staying on top of everything financially, and it can start to feel like you're working really hard just to stay in the same place. That's why I wanted to have this conversation today. I want to talk about that real life side of financial planning. One of the biggest misconceptions about financial stress is that it only happens during major emergencies or some huge crisis. Sometimes it does, but most financial stress builds much more quietly than that. It's the accumulation of small pressures over time. It's 100 little things that may seem insignificant in the moment, but end up compiling in the long run. Groceries cost more, gas prices fluctuate, tires need replaced, kids need things unexpectedly, travel comes up or paying for summer camps, something breaks at home, monthly expenses slowly shift. Does any of this sound familiar? It hits home for me. Suddenly, that what once felt manageable starts feeling emotionally tighter. And that's why financial stress can feel so overwhelming. Notice that none of those things that I just mentioned are necessarily financial emergencies. But when they all happen around the same time, they can make you feel like you're constantly trying to catch up. For many people, financial stress is less about not understanding money and more about trying to manage everything life throws at them all at once. There can sometimes be pressure to hold everything together for everyone else first. It could be anything from managing schedules, households, children, aging parents, or work responsibilities. And then your finances become one more thing competing for attention. That emotional load can become exhausting over time. I recently had a conversation with someone who was feeling pressured to retire a bit earlier than they anticipated due to having to care for their aging parents. They were exhausted, overwhelmed, and trying to juggle it all in the midst of other outlying circumstances happening in their life. When people are exhausted, even simple financial decisions can feel heavier than they should. That's a lot for anyone. Financial stress is rarely only financial. Here's something that I often see. People start second guessing themselves. They feel guilty spending money. They avoid financial conversations. They feel behind compared to where they thought they'd be. And over time, that emotional pressure affects confidence too. I think many people are much harder on themselves financially than they need to be. I've had conversations with people who make good money and still feel like they're falling apart financially. I've also had conversations with people who are doing better than they think they are, but because of carrying so much pressure, they can't see it. Or people tend to compare themselves to their neighbors or their friends and coworkers or even people on social media. They assume that everyone else has it figured out, but trust me, they don't. When we acknowledge the emotional side of money, it becomes easier to respond with clarity instead of shame. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, stressed, guilty, or discouraged about money, you're in very good company. What matters financially at one stage of life may look completely different later on, and that's normal. Life has a way of changing our priorities, whether we planned for it or not. I know that's been true for me. As a simple example, before I had children, my financial priorities looked very different. When I had my third child, she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, and suddenly I found myself thinking about things I had never considered before. I also became the recipient of a pacemaker at 34 years old, and have to accommodate cardiologist and electrophysiologist visits throughout the year now. That's life doing life things. In addition to children growing older, parents needing support, work or career changes, health situations arising, people simply realize they want their time and energy spent differently than before. And of course, with priorities changing, financial decisions often follow right along. That doesn't mean that someone failed. It simply means that life evolved. This is why having a sense of your current season matters so much. I like calling it a season because it implies that your situation isn't going to last forever. When we step back and assess the season that we're in, it helps us to create a plan. Planning isn't about preventing every stressful moment from ever happening. That's impossible because life will still happen. It's not if unexpected things come up, it's when. But planning can help reduce how overwhelming those moments feel when they do happen. I also think that emotional stability matters just as much as the numbers themselves. When people have even a little more structure and organization, they tend to feel less reactive and more prepared. It isn't about perfection, as Laura said. It just requires a starting point. The goal isn't to create a financial plan that never changes. It's to have enough clarity and preparation that when life changes, you have the ability and know-how to adjust. When people feel unclear financially, everything starts feeling urgent. One of the biggest mistakes that people can make is to make financial decisions while they're panicking. I get it. Urgency tends to increase emotional decision-making. Everything suddenly feels like it needs to be solved immediately. People either freeze completely because they feel overwhelmed, or they make short-term decisions simply to relieve stress temporarily. But often, what helps most is slowing situations down emotionally long enough to create understanding. Look at the numbers. Look at the facts. Figure out what is exactly happening, not what you're afraid might happen. That pause can make a real difference. It gives you space to think instead of just react. Often, the most meaningful progress starts with small moments of awareness. Understanding where things stand and creating enough structure that decisions feel less reactive over time. Financial planning isn't only about future goals. It's also about helping people prepare and feel more stable in everyday life. Sometimes that begins with one small decision. Speaking of small decisions, if you're wondering where to start, I want to offer 3 practical steps, not someday or when life settles down, this week. First, if you don't already have one, open a high-yield savings account and name it something like emergency fund. Sometimes just giving that account a clear purpose makes it easier to build consistently. If you wanted to get a little fancier, you're welcome to open more than one high-yield savings account and, for example, label one car repairs or next year's summer camp. Second, set up an automatic weekly or monthly transfer even if it starts small. With technology these days, it's usually very simple to do. You do not have to wait until you can save a perfect amount in your checking account to put it into savings. Small automated amounts are better than waiting until you feel like you have extra money. And third, build a plan for surprise expenses. Because when you plan for surprises, they aren't actually surprising anymore, are they? Ask yourself, who would I call? What could I pause? Which savings account would the money come from? Having these answers ready ahead of time can make a stressful moment feel much more manageable. And I'll leave you with this. If you're waiting for life to calm down before you get serious about your finances, you're probably going to be waiting a long time. There's always another bill, another responsibility, or another unexpected expense. So instead of waiting for the perfect time, start where you are. Even if it's only $5 or $10 on an automated regular basis, it's worth it. Another super helpful thing that you can do is keep a short list of financial priorities for this season. Not forever, just for this season. That might mean focusing on an emergency savings or paying down one specific debt or covering a known expense that's coming up, or it might simply mean getting organized enough to feel more in control. When urgent decisions come up, a short priority list can help you sort through them with less stress and more clarity. And remember, not everything has to be solved all at once. I want to reiterate that you do not need perfect circumstances to begin creating more financial clarity. Even small adjustments now, small conversations, and small moments of awareness can create meaningful change over time. So, if you want a place to start, choose one action this week. Open the high yield savings account, set up the automatic transfer, write out your preparing for surprises plan, or make your short list of priorities for this season. Honestly, that's something every one of us can do. Financial planning should support people through changing seasons of life, not make them feel intimidated by them.